Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your one channel for everything VR related. Today, we're going to be discussing all the Oculus Quest, or rather the Facebook hate, the divergence of the VR community that's starting to resemble console fanboyism, and we're going to break down why everyone has such strong opinions. By the end of this video, I'm hoping we all find a lot more common ground, and we'll acknowledge all the contributions and shortcomings of all the players in the VR industry. So let's not waste any more time and start this video off by dissecting the two different VR camps. On one side, we have the PCVR Elitist, touting the higher graphical and audio fidelity, the ability to mod their games, and those deeper, higher budget, more immersive VR experiences. And on the other side, we have the Oculus Quest fanboys, emphasizing the affordability, ease of use, versatility, and wireless capabilities. So who's right in this situation? Well, they both are. These are both completely valid viewpoints. The problem is, some of these items are more relevant to the specific individual. People also have a tendency to combine their personal preference with their personal identity. So any attack on something they like feels like a personal attack on themselves. This is something we all need to work on a bit, and at the same time, we also need to try and understand the position of the opposing party. So we'll start off with why people love their specific device, and move into why they may hate one of the other devices out there. So PCVR was the true start for VR. The first attempts at standalone VR were quite abysmal, and some of that stigma still remains today, but more importantly, the gap between PCVR and standalone is still quite huge. The only true AAA VR title, Half-Life Alyx, remains a PCVR exclusive, and there are just some other items that remain unmatched on both the hardware and software sides. There's dual 4K 90Hz, 180 plus degree field of view headsets, full body tracking, facial tracking, and mods that turn already good games like Skyrim into whole new worlds. Even some PCVR games produced years ago are arguably better than what's being made on the Quest now. And the majority of new Questers out there are experiencing watered down versions of what the PCVR community played 2 to 3 years ago. It's just undeniable there are things you can get from PCVR that you cannot get anywhere else. But right now, the PCVR community feels a bit betrayed. They were early adopters and supported this new technology, defended the industry through the VR is dead days, and now with the focus shifting towards Oculus Quest titles, they feel like they're being left behind. So it's completely understandable that there's some Quest resentment out there. The Quest has had some powerful impact on VR game development. Clearly, developers want to pursue the platform with the greatest potential for monetary return, but developing for the Quest does impose some overall limitations to the scope of a game. Now, if you're a Quester with some building anger right now, please just put it aside. Remember, we will be covering everything today, and you will be defended. Now, these issues I've mentioned are definitely enough to frustrate the PCVR community, but where is the hate coming from? Well, that's when we have to add Facebook into the equation. Facebook is a company with a very checkered past. And I know what you're thinking right now. All companies collect your data. Why are we singling out Facebook? But we have to stop because that is a completely invalid argument. This is the what about argument. What about Google? What about Microsoft? And it's completely invalid when you're judging an individual company. This would be the equivalent of being on trial for murder and trying to invoke the names of other people who either got away with murder or committed worse crimes. So if you murdered your wife, it's not a defense to say, well, what about Jeffrey Dahmer? He killed way more people than me. Every individual or company should be judged solely on their deeds alone. And let's just briefly look into some of those deeds so we have a better understanding of why people do not trust Facebook. Starting with the man himself, Mark Zuckerberg, we can clearly see from his text messages he had little respect for your personal data. Now, it's very possible he has changed over time, and I don't want to judge something on some messages they put out 10 years ago, but let's just continue with the history of his company. In 2012, Facebook conducted psychological tests on nearly 700,000 users by purposely modifying their newsfeed. The project was intended to see if they can influence a user's mood. In 2016, Facebook was under fire for censorship practices, removing posts that did not violate the terms of service. And also in 2016, Facebook did little to censor rampant misinformation. In the months leading up to the 2016 US presidential election, confirmed false stories were spreading at a much faster rate than verifiable stories. One such story was shared nearly 1 million times and claimed that Pope Francis had endorsed President Trump for presidency. In 2017, Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, left Facebook. In 2018, he stated he was forced to leave. Now there's a lot more to this story that I'm not going to unpack here, but aspects of it are controversial in nature. 2018 had one of the largest scandals for Facebook when the story broke that Cambridge Analytica was able to access the personal information of 87 million Facebook users. This information was used for targeted campaigning and ultimately impacted the 2016 presidential election. In 2019, Facebook settled with the Federal Trade Commission for $5 billion for their mishandling of personal data. And currently, Facebook is being investigated by multiple governments for anti-competitive business practices. And these stories are just the tip of the iceberg. Clearly, we've seen some broken promises, and the anti-competitive practices continue today with Oculus. We were told that Facebook accounts would never be needed, and Facebook is the only company forcing exclusives in the VR industry. They're also imposing unnecessary hardware restrictions, and at the same time purchasing prominent studios and forcing them to produce Quest exclusives. So when people say they won't buy a Quest because of Facebook, this is where it's coming from. We have a societal issue where bad behavior is constantly rewarded, or you can just buy your way out of trouble. Some people just don't want to stand for this, but I also know that there's many more who really just don't give a crap, and they have a very valid counter argument. Where would VR currently be without Facebook? Facebook is literally putting billions of dollars into VR, they're funding developers, producing hardware at extremely affordable prices, and ultimately making VR mainstream. There's no denying this. Facebook is currently the only true player in VR at the moment. Yes, the PlayStation VR was the most popular at one point, and Valve has made some huge contributions, but PCVR has existed to consumers for 5 years now. It remains relatively expensive, it's primarily a tethered experience, and it's still too complicated for some people. PCVR had its chance. It was a slow grind, and it didn't really succeed. There's plenty of amazing PCVR titles that just didn't make it due to the low player base. And if that trend continued, developers would abandon the platform. So many people are willing to put up with Facebook because it's the only company giving them what they want. And to reiterate on what I previously said, some people won't care at all what Facebook is up to as long as they can get a cool device for $300. And while we're going back and forth like this, we could get very granular and even petty about what everyone's doing right and wrong. The index controllers break too often. Facebook locks accounts for no reason. Wireless is better. Graphics are better. I can take a Quest 2 anywhere. 2 hours of battery life and 64 gigabytes is just not enough for real gamers. At the end of the day, it all comes down to your personal preference. PCVR is better for some, and for others, it's a ridiculous expense for not much additional benefit. This is my channel after all, so I will interject with my own opinion, and I do prefer the PCVR experience. I like to push things to their limit, and I'm sure anyone who spends a lot of money on their specific hobby can agree with this concept, but at the same time, the moves that Facebook is making for the industry are absolutely mandatory. I just don't want Facebook to be the only face of VR gaming. This is the same company that was forcing Farmville down your throat 10 years ago. The industry definitely needs competition, otherwise we just have to take whatever Facebook gives us. So hopefully some new options pop up, consumers will have a choice, and they can support whatever they want. But in the meantime, just stop the BS, guys. If someone likes playing on a Quest, let them enjoy the game. If you prefer the PCVR experience, that's good for you too. But let's try and push the industry towards something that's beneficial to everyone. Okay, everybody, that was today's opinion piece. It was a bit more kumbaya than normal, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. And as always, I will see you guys on next time.